So I'm here at Martin Luther King Jr. Civic Center Park in downtown Berkeley, and I want to try to wrap up our course together on mind and nature in German idealism. Um, I think in the shadow of this course is probably a course you might call mind and um, polis, or mind and city in German idealism, and we would have spent a lot more time emphasizing Kant's essay on the cosmopolitan ideal, the, his essays on the Enlightenment, what it means to be enlightened, and we would have spent more time on Hegel and his philosophy of right and his philosophy of the state, right? But this was a course on mind and nature, so we spent more time on Schelling, and really I emphasized, I designed the course to emphasize the Schellingian perspective and to bring these philosophers, Kant, Fichte, Schelling, and Hegel, into conversation with Goethe and his alternative form of natural science, his alternative scientific method, or phenomenological method. And many treatments of German idealism have kind of left him out or only included him because of the significance of his getting appointments, securing appointments for all three of the post-Kantian thinkers, Fichte, Schelling, and Hegel. It was Goethe who interceded with the University of Jena to get them their first appointments, because Goethe appreciated their attempts to articulate a philosophy of the absolute. Goethe himself was not a philosopher. He was an artist, a poet, and an experimenter. A scientist in the sense of a participatory science rather than a Cartesian reflective science or dualistic science. So by emphasizing the Goethean understanding, the Goethean intuitive understanding of the mind's relationship to nature, and emphasizing the Schellingian natural philosophy, the transcendental naturalism, if you will, I've tried to tell a version of the story or of this history of German idealism that's often marginalized, right? But just because I did that doesn't mean that I want to try to contradict, in the sense of just reject and negate the political and more idealistic, even implications of German idealism, because as I've been going through these the works of these thinkers with you and thinking about mind's relationship to nature, we've been undergoing perhaps the most destabilizing social and political events since the 1960s. And so that, has situated me in a context wherein, through the course of this semester with you all, I found myself wanting to hang out more in a kind of Hegelian perspective, which acknowledges always the social and conceptual mediation of our experience of nature, whereas with the Schelling and Goethe, there's this sense that we're just intuitively, immediately connected to, bound up with the natural world without any kind of social mediation. So I think, in leading us into these German idealist thinkers with this emphasis on nature and grounding of thought in nature, I don't I don't mean to deny or to you know negate the more mind-oriented and spirit-oriented philosophy, such as Hegel. Um, but to think through these ideas in our current context, I think it forces us not to assume that materialism is the default ontology of natural science, and it calls us, so in a theoretical sense, it forces us to realize that science need not and perhaps should not be materialistic. Natural science should be organic. Um, so that's on the theoretical plane. On the practical plane, in terms of ethics and morality, I think what the German idealists can teach us is that the individual and the community are intrinsically bound up with one another, and that binding of individuals within communities is conflictual, inherently um, laborious, and it really is, on some level, a kind of battle to the death, right? As Hegel describes it in the Phenomenology of Spirit, where eventually a sort of master-slave dialectic unfolds as every individual, by their very nature, strives for mastery over the world, over nature, and over other individuals. But as Hegel describes it, and as Fichte before him really unpacked, as individuals, in order to realize our own autonomous freedom, we have to be recognized by other free autonomous beings. And there's a inescapable contradiction in that situation, which places a free individual in relationship to another free individual, whereby the very essence of what it means to be a free individual is to be responsible to other free individuals. In order for us to do politics, right, in order for us to have rational debate with one another in a public arena, we need to have this sense of mutual recognition. Otherwise, our thinking is not free. So this whole discussion about free speech, right, which has been waging here in Berkeley, right, it's been ground zero nationally for this debate about free speech and the limits of it. And I think within the left, a debate about the effectiveness or the ethicality of violence. We have Martin Luther King Jr. there, right? And I think he certainly advocated nonviolence, and he also marched on occasion with those like Malcolm X who would advocate violence in some circumstances as the only way to achieve justice or reconciliation for a crime committed. But MLK himself would insist upon nonviolence, and I think there's both an ethical and a pragmatic or sort of utilitarian justification to be made for, or argument to be made for nonviolence, right? So I think not only is it more effective, but it's more virtuous. So I think, in the context of someone like Hegel's political philosophy, it's not that he would say, oh, well, we should all just get along, right? He's really just not trying to prescribe so much as to describe history as it has actually unfolded. And obviously, history has unfolded through a series of wars. Both wars between nations and peoples and tribes, and wars within peoples, within nations, civil wars. And So history is a slaughter bench for Hegel, but it's through that conflict that novelty is born, that spirit is able to develop through its, um, you know, develop through its various shapes, in a way that is progressive, that moves towards greater beauty, deeper truth and goodness. Hegel wouldn't deny the labor and suffering that is involved. And I think the way that he tries to provide insight into what it means to go beyond conflict is not to try to, naively assume we could sidestep it, but to say, go through it. And go through it in the most intense way possible, which sometimes it does seem to me at least, that war is the only way forward. And we have to go through it in order to get beyond it. But it remains a question for me that I think many thinkers and scholars are still asking now about Hegel, and it's a kind of question that I think Marx initially asked in an extremely forceful and historically consequential way. A question about how spirit is related to matter and what the ethical obligations of spirit are when the nature of matter has been comprehended. So examining material conditions, I think, is examining history, right? And the way that the material conditions defining human society have evolved over the course of history is still a Hegelian analysis. And we may not, like Hegel, want to end the historical process in some kind of spiritual unity, but we still, even if we're Marxist, will say that society can improve itself by understanding itself, by analyzing the material conditions of its class system. Society can awaken to itself, and the state can be gradually dismantled, because when free beings recognize one another as free beings, there's no need for the state to coerce anyone. At least that is the dream, right? The socialist dream, communist dream. We have to get there, right? And that's a challenging endeavor, obviously. So, I think we have a lot to learn from the German idealists, and Hegel in particular. And, German idealism has fallen out of favor, especially in the English-speaking world, for the last 150 years, really. Until much more recently, when I think there's been a resurgence of interest in Hegel and Schelling, and this recognition that their problems are still our problems, and that a lot of the solutions that they offered are in fact as relevant to the problems faced by natural science, by political science today. So what I hope we have achieved together in this semester is, for those of you who have never read these thinkers before, or only read one of them, Kant probably, I hope that you feel more prepared to dive into their primary works, because we just really scratched the surface, and I offered a sort of general history with a explicit, I hope, bias that I admitted at the beginning. Um, there are other stories to tell, and those can be your stories. And I encourage you in your final papers to try to tell your own version of the story, because I think by comparing versions, we can only better understand uh, what these geniuses, not just individual geniuses, but geniuses who um, confronted one another's ideas in the context of intense and tumultuous friendships. Um, that is part of what makes their genius unique, right? Yeah, they remain my teachers. As I read Kant and Fichte and Schelling and Hegel, I only come to appreciate each of their unique contributions more. And I think you really do have to approach German idealism as a kind of sim philosophy, as I've called it before, which is to say, a philosophy done in concert with others, where there's a recognition that intersubjectivity is really primordial, and that ideas arise in between individual minds rather than within individual minds. So, thank you for the conversation that we've been able to have over the course of this semester. I've really enjoyed the discussion forums. So I look forward to reading your papers, and don't hesitate to shoot me an email if you want to run a topic by me, or if you want some suggestions for sources, if you're examining a particular aspect of any of the thinkers we've covered. I'm happy to provide more resources for you. So, yep. Thanks for listening, and it's been a great semester for me. Take it easy, guys.